you know, when you're with an organization for 16 years and you leave, you have affinity. You're not there for a year, you know, 3 years. It's not like resume, boom, next. Yeah, resume, boom, next. It's like, that's longevity. 16 years when you're at an organization. Yeah, that's what you know. You're there. You are ESPN. You're part of ESPN. How much of working at ESPN behind closed doors did you guys speak? Because some of the people, I'm like, I used to watch Broussard a lot. He's not there anymore. I used to watch this guy a lot. What happened to those guys? Is there something that happens that if you're politically different than what they believe in, is there, you know, opportunity simply because of what you favor and what you don't? And those groups who are maybe on the conservative side, do some of the people say, well, look, Sage, you and I, we're not on the same page, but I got to pay the bills. My kids are going to this, and I got to make this money, and da-da-da. There's no way in the world I can say anything right now. But I'm with you. But please don't tell anybody that I told you that. Does that happen at ESPN as well, the same way it happens in Hollywood?
There's a lot of whispering.
There is.
A lot of whispering and like texts, and you can't say it out loud. And now, listen, if you're on the other side, you can't sit in the makeup room without hearing it from the other talent, for sure, who are empowered to go off on it and to rip on Republicans or conservatives. And most of the people who I know felt differently, and maybe more in the middle, center, right, just would stay quiet. And then it got to the point where, like, around me, people wouldn't say anything. You know, are there people who are in favor because of their politics and their leanings? I think absolutely. If I had stayed quiet, I'd still be rolling. My contract still wouldn't have been up by now. But again, you have to ask yourself at what cost. I did have a couple of people, certainly. I already knew who they were, right? And they would text me, I love you. I wish I could right now. I wish I could. And I get it. But I'm also kind of blown away because they're all men. I'm like, hey, boys, where are you?
Yeah.
How am I the only one out here? And by the way, you got NFL money. Like, all those guys have a lot more money than I will ever have from having played for years and years, and NBA guys too. So that's where I find it interesting. And maybe, like, most importantly right now for one of today's hot topic is like the transgender sports issue. And these men that I work with have daughters who are very competitive and good athletes. And I know damn well that if their daughters had to oppose a boy on the other side of the volleyball net or the basketball court, that's not happening. Like, they'd go down there and make a scene. So to be quiet about it, it's not even about, you know, race, which is sensitive, or COVID or the vaccine. This is black and white with science. I mean, since the beginning of time, we know the difference between men and women and the different strengths that men have. And all these men are staying silent. So I am disappointed, but I get it. There is a legitimate reason to fear speaking up. It's very personal, but I will say it is pretty lonely. Now, this isn't a woe is me, because I don't care anymore. It just took years to get there, and years of feeling like I couldn't be myself. And if only I thought like this, I would be celebrated. Like, I was the highest paid woman at that network. Like, I would have kept going forever, hopefully. I'll shut up after this. When I started there, you guys, my kids were 11 months, 2 and 4. My youngest daughter turns 18 on Saturday, 18, 20, and 22. So that's all they've known. That's all I've known. And that was my dream since I was a kid. So I didn't get off on like, oh, let me go blow somebody up and go blow up a company. It was devastating, yet it was the right thing for me based on all the years where I was forced to adapt to what someone else wanted.
Well, those men... Tom. Sorry, go ahead.
You know, some people have enough of a platform to say something. And right on the vax thing, Pat McAfee was unafraid to have Aaron Rodgers on his podcast, which came over to ESPN, knowing that Pat is unafraid to speak from his platform. And yet they even came down to stifle him, but Pat wasn't having it. He was very critical. He kind of went along with the 1 day or 2 day suspension, whatever it was, on Aaron Rodgers. But then he named names. Then he said, yes, Norby is the guy. Norby is the guy from corporate. And said, there's a guy from corporate down here, and it's Norby, and he is trying to manipulate.
You want to play the clip? That's a very good transition. Go ahead, Rob.
We're very appreciative, and we understand that more people are watching this show than ever before. We're very thankful for the ESPN folks being very hospitable. Now, there are some people actively trying to sabotage us from within ESPN. Funny. More specifically, I believe Norby Williamson is the guy who is attempting to sabotage our program.
Look at
I'm not
AJ's
100%
face.
sure.
Yeah, he doesn't know what
that is just seemingly the only human that has information, and then somehow that information gets leaked, and it's wrong, and then it sets a narrative of what our show is? And then are we just going to combat that from a rat every single time? I don't know. But like somebody tried to get ahead of our actual ratings release with wrong numbers 12 hours beforehand. That's a sabotage attempt. And it's been happening basically this entire season from some people who didn't necessarily love the old edition of the Pat McAfee show to the ESPN family.
Sure.
You can pause it right there. So do you agree with them?
Yes.
Did you have similar experience with Norby?
I've known Norby from day one, and he just left last week after 40 years in the company. I believe that was kind of the final nail in the coffin for Norby when Pat McAfee went on and said that. Now, there's a couple of things. Number one, I texted with Pat that day. I was like, you go. And because he was speaking for a lot of people. Made me sad because I knew Norby as a person. And I knew that his heart was very different from some of the decisions that he made. But I'll also say this. As much as I absolutely agree with a lot of the things Pat said as far as just behind the scenes. I don't know that Norby was the one, influencing numbers or being untruthful about. I don't know. What I do know is that even though all of us agree with Pat, I thought it was fascinating that when have you ever seen an employee in our industry go on the air and name names, and not just name names, but call that executive who's been there for 40 years a rat. And then he doubled down a couple days later, and then he posted a picture with Norby's new boss, Burke Magnus, and Burke allowed that picture to be posted. I mean, so when you see them not punishing him for it, because even if you agree with what the guy said, you guys, it's still kind of unacceptable for someone to publicly call out a boss at the company by name and call him a name. They let it slide, no punishment, still went to the national championship game a couple days later. What does that tell you? If nothing's done to that person, by the way, I did a fraction of that and I was out, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So I think the principle of it was wrong. Like if you say that, you got to be held accountable, but they did nothing to him. And at that point I was like, Norby's out.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that is that they did nothing to him?
Well, I think there's other people that realized it was probably time for Norby to go. We thought for years it might be happening. But also when you're Pat McAfee, you have control. What is it, $18 million a year? So the only people at ESPN that make that money are Joe Buck, Troy Aikman, Stephen A's, a few million behind them. So when Pat comes in and knows he's got that power, that's that FU money in many ways. You know what I mean? You got that power. You're going to say, what are they going to do? Take him off when he's got this huge contract? So he used his power in a way that we have never seen before in this industry, and look what just happened.
So if you like this clip and you want to watch another one, click right here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click right here.